Welcome to the fourth debate on this channel. Sorry to interrupt you, Krishna, doing your introduction.
It's okay.
This is between Krishna on the left here and Nathan on the right. And the subject for this debate is actually a statement as opposed to a question this time. It is God is the first life and the cause of all life. Krishna is taking the positive position, or the agree to that statement position, and Nathan is taking the disagree to that statement position. So let's start this again. It's 5 minutes for opening statements for each person, followed by an hour of open discussion, and then any questions, you post them please in the chat, tagging my name so that I can note them down. And that will be for however many questions we have. So, Krishna, if you'd like to start again, sorry about that, mate. You have 5 minutes, and it's all yours.
All right. So my name is Krishna Das. I'm from New Jersey in the United States. I'm with the Bhaktivedanta Institute of Spiritual Culture and Science in Princeton, New Jersey. We are a nonprofit institute educational organization working towards the synthesis of science and religion, towards promoting the role, the consideration of the role of consciousness in modern science. And we're doing these things based off of a Western and Eastern philosophical background. Primarily the Eastern philosophical background is from the Bhagavat Vedanta philosophy, also known as Bhakti Yoga. And the Western philosophical background is mainly grounded in Hegelian philosophy and the line of thought that comes through Hegel from Plato, Aristotle, through Kant, and the similarities actually that we find through that line of Western thought and Eastern thought. So one of the main observations that our position is based in is that life and matter both come from life. Now, we see every day that life comes from life. On the small scale, we see living cells, which is the smallest living organism, coming from other living cells only. On more of a macro scale, we're seeing all living organisms only coming from other living organisms. Mothers, fathers produce a baby, and so on. We're never seeing that life is coming from matter. We've never observed that. Yet, that is the position of modern science. It's called abiogenesis. They're saying that life and matter both originate from matter, that lifeless chemical soup, just matter over billions of years, and random mutations and such have resulted in life. And that has not more indirectly led to a modern culture that is largely doubting the existence of God, doubting even reason, inherent reason in reality. Many people are thinking we have to create our own reason, that we have to create our own purpose. And that can largely be found in this foundation of belief, this ontological position that has just permeated from society, which is rooted in what modern science has taught. But like I said, it's an observation, an empirical observation, that life and matter both come from life. Even with matter, we're seeing that fingernails and hair are only growing on living bodies, right? If somebody dies, then very soon that hair and nails will also stop growing. Yet we're seeing a tree from a very small seed, a living seed. We can have a giant California redwood, very magnificent. However, if you kill that seed before planting it, you put it in a toaster oven, nothing will come. No matter will generate. Matter is only coming from life also. We're making that empirical observation. So we're interested in discussing this among the scholars and scientists, and how we can integrate this into the modern scientific conception. Also, the role of consciousness. I'll wrap up in the next minute and a half here. The Cartesian petition from Descartes' dualism, which is very influential in modern science, has separated matter and mind as two completely separate substances which are not connected. And so modern science is strictly empirical and reductionistic, always reducing things, always only focusing on what we can perceive with the senses and measuring those things. It's not accounting for the role of mind at all. But in the last 30, 40 years, actually, there's been this movement of consciousness studies, how we can rationally and systematically consider the role of consciousness in the observed world, and also what the implications of consciousness are. how we can understand life and consciousness in a rational, systematic way, how we can understand what the implications of those things are, and how that relates to the existence of God. So there's about 30 seconds left, but I think I can stop there. Yeah, sure.
To the debate thing here. Right. So thanks for that one, Krishna. That was very interesting first statement from you. So now, Nathan, again, the subject is God is the first life and the cause of all life. You're taking the disagree statement to that. So when you're ready, Nathan, the floor.
Am I able to share my screen at all, Darren, by the way? I think
it might be turned off, mightn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That's okay.
Security, it's usually in there.
I can have Krishna's extra 30 seconds as well, right?
Well, if you need extra time, I'm sure Krishna won't mind. So,
I think it should be okay, but I haven't ran it through beforehand, so I don't know
not
exactly.
A problem. Okay, Nathan, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll just try sharing and hopefully we'll be okay. So can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it. It's not full screen though.
Yeah, there we go. It should be now. Happy to begin. Okay, cool. So yeah, well, firstly, I suppose thank you to Darren for having me on, and thank you to Krishna for being here to discuss this topic with me. I really enjoyed these sorts of conversations. So I basically, if you don't know me, my name's Nathan, and I was a stereotypical Christian with the weird sort of clothing choice there of the tie and the sleeveless jumper. And I went to a horrible stereotypical atheist. Well, I'm not quite an atheist. My position is what's called local agnosticism, and I even still describe myself as a non-realist Christian. So I don't really believe in theistic metaphysics, which is going to be pretty important to our discussion today. I'm only really describing my own beliefs and knowledge. I'm not maintaining the position that people can't, in principle, know whether a God exists or not. It's just me that doesn't. So in principle, God might exist. Someone else might know that God exists. To some respect, I'm trying to withhold judgment, and I can see how both sides can rationally hold their position. But I believe that some models of God and claims about the supernatural are false and probably shouldn't rationally compel us to believe. So yeah, the claim in this discussion today is God is the first life and the cause of all life. So a definition of God that I think we're working under that was given by Krishna is God is the supreme personality who is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. He's the source of energy to create, maintain, and destroy the cosmic manifestation. God is immanent throughout the material world, as well as transcendent to it. God is the cause of all causes, who himself is self-caused, causes sui. He is by and for himself. He is subject as well as substance. God is the absolute truth, in which all contradiction is harmonized. God is infinite and unlimited, remaining eternally fresh throughout his dynamic, loving pastimes. So I was thinking then, within this definition of God, there's actually quite a few sort of claims built in, which would all have to be true for this particular model of God to be correct. So me being an idiot, having my mind corrupted by analytic philosophy, I kind of thought, well, we've got these two conditions which have to be met, that God's the first cause and the cause of all life, but then we've also got all these other conditions that have to be met. Now, if we're thinking about like a conjunction truth table, right? So with just two kind of conditions, then only this first row where both hold, is that actually true? But if we have n variables, then we're going to have 2 to the n rows in the truth table. So if you think of all those conjuncts, then there's going to be all those rows that are false and only the one where all of them are true that it's true. So in some sense, my job's quite easy here tonight. And I thought maybe what I don't want to do is like focus on this minutiae so much. So basically, yeah, like in terms of one of the propositions that's involved, God is the cause of all causes. I want us to look for kind of like shifting the quantifier. So for every X, there is some Y such that X causes Y isn't the same as, for example, there's some X such that it causes every Y. So one way of thinking about this is like the claim that all men have a mother, right? Which you might think is true, but it doesn't follow from that there's a mother of all men. So if we're saying there's a cause of all causes, we want to be careful for this kind of reasoning. We want to look at the complexity of the explanation given by theism. So if we think of all the different types of claims that are involved, then there's going to be a certain type of ontological liberalism involved, where basically like we're committing all these extra things to our ontology, all these extra things which need to exist, as well as the natural world, which I think we're both going to be committed to. And now, the proponent of theism can go for something called divine simplicity, which would be to say that all these attributes are actually the same as each other. But in my personal point of view, that just doesn't make any sense to say that omniscience is omnipotence. They just seem to be different things. Now, because the time's ticking down, I guess I'm going to skip through some of this, right, just to get to basically the root of it. So I'm going to commit myself to three claims about naturalism here. So there are none but natural causes involving there are none but natural causes involving none but natural entities. That should be. The distribution of minds in the universe is late and local. Only recently evolved creatures have minds and mental properties, and those minds and mental properties are tied to relatively complex biological structures of the evolved creatures in question. There is nothing in the natural world that is divine or worthy of worship, at least objectively. Psychologically, we might kind of desire to do so. I'm going to be skeptical of the role of deductive reasoning in this, because deduction is just truth preserving. So if you can see, I'm really kind of wary of the clock ticking down because I don't want to bloviate and go over. I'm really close to the end, so maybe 30 more seconds or a minute or so. So if we're going to conclude, for example, that Socrates is mortal, and that's the thing we're discussing, then if I'm maintaining that Socrates is not mortal, of course I'm going to reject one of the premises. So if we're going to use deductive reasoning to get to God, then we're going to have difficulties there. But our theories, many different theories, can be logically consistent. The question is, which of these theories is the best one? So I think maybe what might be productive for the discussion is talking about what are the different theories that me and Krishna are putting forward. What are the different kinds of things we're committed to, and how do they explain the data? How do they fit the data, and evaluate our explanations in that way? So I think we're both going to be committed to the existence of natural causes involving natural entities, late and local minds. Every worldview basically accepts that our minds and mental properties are somehow connected to our neural properties. So every worldview is committed to what the naturalist is committed to, but some worldviews are committed to more as well. So I guess I'll end it around there, because I'm just wary of the time and I don't want to eat into it all.
Sure. Okay, no problem. So, two very interesting opening statements. Nathan's focused more on the philosophical kind of jargon that a lot of it goes over my head, I must admit, having never studied philosophy. So if we're ready then, gentlemen, we can begin with the 1 hour open discussion.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
Over to you.
Sure.
Yeah. I'll apologize first, Krishna.
First
by apologizing that my opening was so bad there, because I just hadn't timed it or anything. I just put a few slides together this morning, and
no worries.
I don't know if I completely made my case. So I guess would you be okay with me asking a question maybe of your worldview to clarify things, or do you have anything you want to ask me first?
No, sure. You can ask a question. Whatever question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, I guess maybe just on like I'm not exactly clear, what it is that you're postulating here. So like, one of the things you said was that the only examples of life coming about we have is life coming from non-life, and maybe I'd agree to that, maybe I wouldn't, but it's not clear to me what is the explanation that you're positing. Are you saying so there can't be like an infinite regress of life, so there must be some first life thing, and that thing is what everyone calls God, or something like that? Is that right? Or you speak for yourself, don't let me put words in your mouth.
So, what I said about life coming from life, yeah, we are saying that there is a first life, not in the sense of a priority of time and a priority of reason, right? So in one of the Introduction to Hegel book by W.T. Stace, he separates, or not separates, but distinguishes between reason and cause, actually. So cause being based on cause and effect, something within time. You have a cause, an effect comes, perhaps that effect is the cause of another effect, and so there's some kind of chain. But from reasoning, the reason of something, the end that it's fulfilling is actually the reason that is the premise of the thing itself in a rational progression. So it's outside of time. It's outside of we're talking about something that's conceptual, not necessarily manifest, right? It's not extended substance. We're talking about mental substance. Descartes makes, right, the separation between these two substances, mind and matter. He's saying that they're not related. They're two independent substances. But if we can accept that they are connected, right? We have to think about raising our hand before we raise our hand. Mind and matter are connected. So now we're going to be dealing with concepts before we get to the particular manifestations of a concept. In Hegel's philosophy, the concept manifests as a universal, as an individual, and as a particular. Okay, so in universals, there is a premise, there is a cause. I'm sorry, a reason. I'm going to get mixed up between these words, cause and reason, because this is still something I'm working with too. But the reason precedes the concept as a premise. So the first cause, the reason behind all of existence, all of reality, would be God. Now, it's not, God is not necessarily then a cause within a time, a prioritized causal chain, cause effect, manifesting through time. Right? He's the reason behind everything, and manifesting also within a cause. He would also be the first cause, setting off that domino effect, in addition to being the primary reason behind it. Now, everything that I'm going to be talking about is finding its foundation in the Bhagavad Vedanta philosophy. And essentially, the most important thing that we have to start with is that God, being infinite, is not accessible to the finite by their own power. So God reveals himself in various ways. Through the world's religions, we have these revealed scriptures, and they're revealing various conceptions of God based upon time, circumstance, and the people who are experiencing the revelation. So everything I'm saying is going to be coming from this background of the Bhagavad Vedanta philosophy. And yes, we are saying that God is the first life, to answer your initial question. So
have you always been in this belief, or did you kind of come to believe it at some point, by the way? Is that like it was there some piece of evidence that sort of compelled you to accept this from some previous kind of worldview or something, or?
It made sense to me. It made sense that God is the harmonizing element to all contradiction that we find in the world around us. We see so much discord, and we know that we're all participating in a single reality. We're all participating in a reality. There's so much differentiation within it, no doubt. But what is that harmonizing element behind everything? That is God. Okay. God is the supreme personality, even. So there's so many elements to the Bhagavad Vedanta philosophy.
Sorry. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying then. So maybe the main reason that you came to think this was true is because there must be a harmonizing principle behind all of reality, because there are different things. So there must be, what's the reason for supposing that there must be, as opposed to say just lots of particular different things, or? And have I paraphrased? Have I even understood what you're saying there correctly? I suppose.
So, yes, one of the main things that drew me to this philosophy and this way of seeing reality was, yes, finding what is that harmonizing element behind everything. Because I recognize that we're living in a reality. All these differences that we're seeing around us are all part of a single reality. Or even we accept, if people are accepting the multiverse theory, actually, no, there's many different universes and all that. They're all a part of some whole. However far out we zoom, they're still a part of a singular, of a reality that's connected to some extent, somehow is connected, right? Whether we can empirically observe the connection, that's a different story. But we can rationally understand that everything we experience in the world around us is connected somehow. And that harmonizing element is God. In a very simplistic way, this is, being introduced here. And probably not so clear. I apologize for the lack of clarity.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm just I'm wondering as well how, because I'm familiar with a few kind of Christian theists who have talks about some similar concepts, like Jonathan Peugeot and Paul van der Klee and stuff. I think they talk about some similar things to at least what you were saying there. But they would want to say, that like the creation itself in their theology is different and distinct from God. For you, would you be saying? I know you're saying that God is omnipresent, so He's kind of throughout the creation, but presumably, I don't know. You would say like I'm distinct from God, or this table and the computer is distinct from God. Is that right?
So we would say that God is immanent and transcendent. This heart of harmonizing, right, is contradiction, is not just two things opposed to each other. So it's a oneness in difference. Have you ever heard of Hegel, G.W.F. Hegel?
Yeah.
His philosophy? Yeah. So in his philosophy also, we're finding the dialectic method, right? Which is the harmonization of harmonizing of opposites. So for instance, we have being and non-being, right? But being and non-being are actually two abstractions of what we experience as constant change or becoming. Everything we see, everything we observe around us is in a constant stage of becoming. It's always changing, because pure being is static. It's only the element of non-being that allows it to change. The non-being of your childhood self is a part of your present being as you are now, which will be manifested later as non-being and what you will become. And the entire progression of life is this becoming, which is simultaneously being and non-being in this dynamic movement. Things aren't just static. There's this progression of becoming. There's this constant underlying nature of differences being harmonized, of opposites being harmonized. It's something that underlies everything.
I'm not clear though on like on my question as to whether in your view, God is identified. Like presumably God isn't me. Like I'm distinct from God, even if God is in some sense omnipresent. Is that something you'd say you think?
Yes. So what we understand is that the human being is a spiritual being, not the body. The body is a part of the human being, no doubt. But the human being is a spiritual soul that is eternal and will persist beyond the body. The soul is an individual from God, but simultaneously participating in the immanence and transcendence of God. God is immanent and transcendent, both beyond the world and us, and also within. So it would be like saying, we are not God, but God is us. God is everything. Everything is participating within the infinite. We are finite and limited. God being infinite and unlimited means that everything which is finite is participating within that infinite.
I mean, I think. Obviously, I don't believe that, but I'm just wondering if you're sort of also, it seems like me saying, there's this same reality out there and the same stuff. There's this universe that we're in. I'm wondering why it is that you didn't just say, well, that's it, that's the stuff. Why was it that you went beyond that to say there's some harmonizing principle behind it all? Or how it is that, like, how could you get me there without just telling me to sort of believe it, kind of thing? Do you know, like, why should I believe it, is what I'm asking, maybe? Or
right. So one of the things that I had said in the beginning was that when we're talking about knowledge of God, when we're talking about the finite, trying to understand something about the infinite, it's not something that can just happen on our power alone. We're going to rationally assert ourselves and develop our robust thinking, and we will arrive at knowledge of the infinite, because that is within our scope, within our power. There is this element of surrender, of humility, that's necessary to accept that which is inconceivable. And it's inconceivable because it's it's beyond our ability to know through our direct power, yet we can still come to know it through taking the negative path, through surrender, through humility, through first beginning with understanding that we know nothing, through understanding that we are as great as we think we are 100 times less than that. We're, super tiny in this massive existence, in this massive reality. So first, if we can cultivate this kind of nature within ourselves, then that starts to change the way our heart is receptive to certain ideas. And then the subjective experience changes. Something makes sense, something that makes sense beyond our initial estimation of reality,
Do you think if if I said to you, well, you can't know every single fact about the natural world because you're just this small being with only so much time, but if you surrender yourself to naturalism and kind of like humble yourself before it, then you too can be a naturalist. Do you think that would kind of compel you to be a naturalist, to adopt my position?
So naturalism meaning
just that
something that's based on the empirical observation of men.
Naturalism would just be that all causes are natural causes, and and there are none but natural entities as well. So no kind of supernatural. So like no souls, like no I'm not a Cartesian. No Cartesian soul. No, I don't think ghosts or no angels or demons or gods as well. On my view, it would just be the commitment to like the sort of spatio-temporal causes, the world. There's also persons like you and me. There are minds in that, but it's just all natural phenomena.
What's the basis of naturalism?
What do you mean the basis?
Where does this body of thought come from?
Well, I mean, my belief.
Is it based on observation? Is it empirical? Does it come from?
Well, it's sort of a bit of both.
Is it like something observed, or?
Well, it comes from my mind in a sense. I mean, like I'm reasoning about things, right? And maybe some of those concepts are innate, and then there's also observations about the world. Like maybe at a point of time I might have sort of looked out the window and walked around and thought the earth was flat, right? But then through a multitude of other reasons that I'm now aware of, some like mathematical, some experimental, etc., I've got good reasons to think the world isn't flat, even though I can understand why it appears to me flat, but it isn't. So it's kind of like taking both of those sort of avenues into account, I would say.
So it's based on trying to start from the self, from the individual, and just observe the world around us, reason with it without taking into consideration wisdom that's coming from outside of ourselves, from other living beings, from other, teachers or something like that.
I mean, I'd say it certainly does take into account wisdom that would come from other sources outside of ourselves. But the point is that there's no mind independent stance for me to think about anything or believe it. So like, even if, let's say if if Jesus, like in the Christians believe, is the Son of God, right? And he knows all truths, and he's telling me some truths. Well, I've still got to use my own mind to reason, about the information that I'm being told, and I can't like step outside of my own being and understand, what's being told to me in some objective sense. So I've still got like a sort of fallible access to the truth, but certainly takes into account what other people believe around us.
So from the naturalistic perspective, you're accepting that there are systems in nature, no? There are rational systems occurring in nature?
As in like me as a person, am I like rational, or you like as a person, in my view, are you rational sort of thing?
No, systems, rational systems, meaning like a tree perpetuating its own life, living through photosynthesis, through some kind of system of interacting with the environment. There's some kind of systematic process. Not that it's random, but there's some kind of systematic process that's constantly going on within a tree for it to perpetuate its life in naturalism, would you accept that?
Yeah, I'd accept. I'd be like committed to that. There are like biological processes and things going on. Yeah, and like
Biological processes, right?
Yeah, and like mechanisms and things, and yeah,
that are intelligible somehow, right? Like now, they're intelligible to us because we're able to understand them to some extent, right?
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Would you think that's because we're just applying our own reason to a natural world that is reasonless, and that the reason that we see in the world are just a result of human reason, or that there is a reason inherent in what we're observing? There's a process that's happening in a specific way, you know?
So
like
so
in nature, we see things happening in a specific way. So is that specific way that we're observing things going on, is that some people think it's just humans applying the reason of man onto the natural world, and some are believing that it's intelligible because there's intelligence behind it, not just coming from our side, but there's intelligence behind what we're observing.
So I sort of think in the first way you kind of phrase that, I don't think I would agree with, where I guess what I heard, and maybe this is a part of me being a bit uncharitable in a way or something, but I heard something like, do you think it's kind of intelligible because it's unintelligible or something? And I was like, well, I don't think that. I think it's intelligible because, like I've got a brain and eyes that can sort of, like my eyes are able to allow the passage of light into it. And it seems to me that, like things like trees are going to reflect light and I can observe them, and my brain pieces together that information and stuff. There's a lot of different things that I guess you could mean by that question. Like, do I think that I have access to some sort of infallible understanding of reality or the way things are? No, I could be wrong. I'm a fallibilist about my own knowledge, but I think there are some decent reasons to believe that I'm representing some kind of world beyond me, which we could get into if that's what you mean. Have I captured what you were getting at there? Or?
I think not. There's one aspect that I'm not communicating properly or clearly. So what you are picking up within a biological system, there is some specific process going on, right? Like we have, catabolism, metabolism, and anabolism, right? The building up, the maintaining, and the breaking down, happening in a specific way. Let's call it A. And it's not happening B. It's happening in a specific way that's intelligible to us. Because we're rational beings, we can understand this event in nature called anabolism, metabolism, and catabolism. Now, are we understanding that because there is rational something? There's like when you see a painting, right? We see that there is intentional design in a painting. There's something intelligible to us. We can derive meaning from it. So we're deriving meaning from catabolism, metabolism, and anabolism. We can understand that something is being created, something is being maintained, and then something is being broken down. Now, so what I'm asking you is, are we able to perceive that strictly because we're taking the rationality of man and applying it onto an external, have a rational component to it? Or beyond the rationality of man, is there a rational component to the natural world that we're participating in?
Yeah, I think I sort of get the question a bit more. I guess for what I think is intelligibility is a relation between a mind and the world, right? So in order so if there were no minds, right, if there was just the universe and there were no minds instantiated in it, then I guess you could say that universe, it would be true that universe is intelligible in principle, but there wouldn't be any cases of intelligibility, because that would be for a mind to stand in relation to a particular thing in the world. Does that get us any further on along those lines, or have I copped out of the question?
Yeah, maybe it'll be more relevant as we go on. Um, but so getting back to the initial statement that I guess this whole event is supposed to be based off of, God is the first cause and cause of all causes. We are saying that life comes from life. This is one of the main observations that we're saying is true. Would you agree that life comes from life?
Yeah, actually, one of the examples in my slideshow that I kind of hastily went through was people used to believe in something called spontaneous generation, which was sort of like where the sun's rays are sort of hitting the earth, right, and constantly producing microorganisms of some kind, and this is how life is coming about on the earth. And it turned out that that wasn't true, or at least our best science currently tells us that wasn't true. And there was a kind of process where natural explanations kind of superseded that. And it's like an example in the philosophy of science of like natural explanations overtaking something that people used to believe that was wrong. So in short, yes, like I do believe that life comes from life.
And modern science doesn't believe that, like, because abiogenesis is largely, of course, like, it's very subjective. When you talk to individual scientists, you have some who don't take that as the truth. But if you type in Google, what is the philosophy of origin of life, I did it one time, literally abiogenesis comes up as the answer.
Yes. So yes, let me, because there's a little bit maybe in how I answered then. So all my I've never observed life coming from non-life. All my observations are of life coming from life, but in principle, I do think abiogenesis can occur. Yes, and I do think as well that is how the type of life that we see on the planet has ultimately come about. I think there was a point so I'd be what's called like a source physicalist. So I think there was a time at which there were no minds in the universe, and then at a later chronological point, some smallest nucleotide or whatever's come about. And I can't offer you a complete explanation. Like I don't know exactly the processes involved, how that happened, whether that happened on this planet or some other planet, and then a meteorite comes here with spores on it or whatever. But that is what I think happened. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, what makes that more credible to you than just like a religious perspective of God created man and everything else?
So I think, for example, it's the fact that the explanation that you're positing involves postulating this whole other thing that I have no idea how it could even work. So there's a being that's God, that I'd have to say exists and then has all these properties, and I don't understand in what way it could exist. Like all the minds that I know seem to have something to do with some kind of physical matter, some kind of neurology of some sort. So I don't understand. It seems to be that this is like an independent of matter mind that precedes the universe in some sense, and then why should we suppose that it desires to bring about life through natural selection? Why not just as an explanation? Here's something that maybe might bring it out. So let's say we've got some phenomena. How would you rank the following? So a true explanation, a false explanation, and a true explanation, a false explanation, and no explanation at all. Like, how would you rank them, like best to worst, do you think?
What am I ranking?
So just in terms of
what am I applying those to?
Yeah, just any explanation. So we've got some phenomena, just any phenomena, like the fact that I like drinking Pepsi or something, and we've got like a true explanation, we've got a false explanation, and we've got just no explanation at all. We just don't know. We okay saying that. How would you rank those, like best to worst? Which one of those do you think is the best, and which one do you think is the worst?
As far as describing a reason why you like to drink Pepsi?
Or just any just explanation in general?
I think I'm missing something. As true explanation, a false explanation, or no explanation at all, behind why a phenomena is appearing before us?
Yeah, just any phenomena. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It can be Pepsi if that makes it easier to think about, but it doesn't.
So Nathan, if I can just quickly jump in, because I'm a bit confused on that as well. So are you saying is it best for us to have an explanation that's definitely true, an explanation that's definitely not true, or just let it be without trying to explain it? Is that which is the best position to take out of those three possibilities?
Yeah, pretty much that. It's like it doesn't have to be. This is just like a thought experiment, right? Where obviously we're going to think some things are true, and we can have false beliefs and all that. So I'm not kind of getting bogged down in that. It's just there are three candidate explanations, right? And in an ideal world, we've got a true one, a false one, and just no explanation whatsoever. And which of those is best for explaining a phenomenon? Like how would you rank all three of them?
Surely, though, that's confusing to me as well. In an ideal world, every explanation would be a true one, wouldn't it?
Well, that would be your answer to the question, I think. So that'd be the best one, a true explanation, right?
Well, for me, but yeah, for Krishna,
Yeah.
I'm not. I'd imagine the same probably.
I'd imagine so, but
So
yeah.
So
I suppose
phenomena means what's appearing to the senses. Phenomena, it means what's appearing to the senses. I believe it was Kant who talks about noumenal reality, which is opposed to phenomenal. Phenomenal is the appearance. Noumenal is the thing in itself, as opposed to the thing for us. So what's appearing before us, we can't say what it is for itself. If we're accepting that reality persists beyond us, reality exists beyond us, there's something that we can't access, but we can accept that something is there because something is appearing to us. That's what a phenomena is. Phenomena is something that we can only perceive with the senses. And I would say most phenomena are shadows of the real thing. So there's a context, there's a greater context that we should consider. We shouldn't be so quick to try to make sense of the immediate appearance of things. We should try to understand the context of the thing. And I think this gets back to the Cartesian partition, where we're not just thinking of extended matter and how it interacts with other extended bodies. There's a cognitive element beyond it. And within that cognitive element, right, so Descartes himself believed in God. He believed in God as the one infinite substance, and then from that one infinite substance, two finite substances came, which were separate from each other, matter and mind. He separated these two things. But then we have Spinoza, who says that, yes, there is one infinite substance, God, and there's no other substances which are separate. Everything is an attribute. Everything is a participant within that one infinite substance. So everything is finding its coherency in the context of God, in the context of the spiritual whole to which everything else is a part. So we'll never have any kind of substantial, persisting explanations of anything unless we understand them in the context of the infinite, right? Any kind of reason that we try to find. I like Pepsi because when I was 5, and I'm not trying to say what I'm about to say applies to you, but just taking your example. I like Pepsi because when I was 5 years old, my mom gave me a Pepsi, and then she wasn't in my life anymore, so I drank Pepsi to remember the good times with my mom. Something like that, right? Like a lot of these relative explanations, we come up with relative explanations. They don't really explain anything beyond our immediate experience, but there's so much more beyond our immediate experience. And, we die. Impermanence is there within our material conception of the world. We know that this life is limited, that we can try to explain everything. We can try to understand everything, but for what purpose? Because at the end of it, we die, we leave the body. Now, whether we understand that there's a spiritual existence that persists beyond that or not, and then we try to live our life trying to be mindful of that spiritual existence, that's a different question, because we would go about living life in a different way. We wouldn't be so concerned about the appearance of things, about the phenomena, and trying to just understand the minutia of the phenomena and get caught up in that. we would try to go a little bit deeper. We would try to cultivate these virtues of humility, of tolerance, of being more careful about respecting other people and loving other people, and trying to understand what is that meaning behind things, instead of just getting caught up in the minutia of things and being caught up in our own perspective. What is beyond us? What happens if we really try to humble ourselves, if we really try to open our heart to things that are inconceivable to us? Like, can the impossible become possible? You know, it sounds kind of corny, I guess, but you know, there's so much out there that we have no idea about and we can't make sense about from our own power. And this is one of the most compelling spiritual arguments for me, is that I understand that I am very limited. I can try to understand as much as possible, but that's also all subject to my own method of questioning. Like, back to what modern science does. Like, Werner Heisenberg said that natural science is not does not find the truth of nature. It finds information about nature which is purely subject to our method of questioning. And that wasn't a direct quote, but it was to that effect. Whatever we're trying to find through the process of science or the process of naturalism or empiricism, whatever we're going to get from that is will be subject to the scope that we're applying to our method of questioning. It's relative. So how can we try to get beyond that relative conception into something which is actually true? True meaning always true, you know, eternal truth, something like that. That's my position.
If I could just very quickly jump in between you, Mel Deduza, I'm sorry, I butchered that, I know, actually made a point that I was thinking of as well, just in terms of the way you worded something there, Krishna, that I'd say be cautious of, is when you said it's a case of whether we acknowledge the spiritual existence beyond us, and that there's, I'd say you got to be careful there, because that's kind of coming across that we already know that there is a spiritual existence there, and it's whether we acknowledge it or not, whereas we don't actually know as of yet. So it's just a matter of phrasing things.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of thought it was kind of embedded in almost all. It wasn't the main point, because I don't, you know, like I feel like maybe we could just kind of go back and forth, almost like describing things that our worldviews entail, and then we're not going to make any progress. But kind of like you know, like one of the things you said was anything is going to be within a context, right? Well, your context just happens to be a kind of theism, and my context isn't theism. And so obviously you're going to say, well, the context ultimate, you know, like if we list off every single fact that I think is true at the same time, one of them is going to be God's existence. And for me, if I list off every single fact that, you know, is true about reality, none of them are going to be to do with God existing or whatever. So it's almost like that sort of presupposing the very thing that is meant to be in question here. But maybe
if I may just add as well, Chris, I do actually agree with your position that there is a spiritual kind of nature to life. Yeah. But we can't really just state that as a given in this sort of context, because it's just a belief at this point on the evidence that we've got.
I think maybe
one of the aspects.
Sorry, Hugh.
Oh,
do you want to go?
Sorry.
I just thought something that might be useful.
Sorry.
Something I just thought might be useful, maybe. So to look at how we compare explanations, right? So let's imagine you and I are walking along the street, right? And there's a house that we come across, and there's a shattered window with a brick on the floor in the room, and the TV's missing. What do you think happened?
What would drive me to try to make sense of the situation, instead of, like, why would I want to participate in that?
Well, it's just a thought.
Like, what's the reason?
In the thought experiment, we're just walking along. We come across this. We think this is pretty odd. Wonder what happened. What do you think? What do you think happened?
Well, I think the answer that you might be looking for is, I would say someone threw the brick through the window, stole the TV, and left. But my position would be less assuming. You know, there are things beyond my comprehension which could have happened. Just because I think that's what makes the most sense based off of my limited experience, doesn't mean that that's what actually happened. Something really crazy, and it could have been a prank. Let's say it could have been like a really intense prank, and now I just called 911 reporting it, and it was completely blown out of proportion because I thought it was something that it wasn't. So I would
Definitely,
try to
definitely.
yeah.
But what do you rationally think you should believe in that situation, just given the evidence that you have available to you? Like it could, for all we know, it could be one of those things. But what is the most probable explanation that you're going for, just based off of what you know in that situation?
So I think essentially
I've never. I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say. So essentially, you walk up to a house. There's a brick on the floor through a broken window, and a TV's missing. So, what's your initial thoughts there? To what would you immediately assume was the case?
Again, I think that the answer that you're looking for perhaps is my past experience, but I don't have any past experience with that. I just have some kind of understanding for what the common expectation of thoughts are, and that would fit the common expectation of experience. So my answer would just be based on understanding what is a common expectation of experience, not based on anything else, because I have no basis for it. So I would always be coming from this position of if I have no basis for something to get involved in something, I have no basis to get involved in it. There's no internal feeling compelling me in a certain direction, then I'm not going to engage in it. Now, if there is something that is wrong and someone is being harmed, then you do your part and you try to report it, try to do something serving the highest good, trying to serve your fellow man. But beyond that, I wouldn't try to pry or get involved in something beyond which is like my civic duty.
But what about, like, I don't know, I maybe I'm just putting words in your mouth at this point, but I don't know. Like, do you not think you just suppose that one person threw a brick through the window and stole the TV? Do you think that's the most likely, just based off of walking along? Do you think that's the initial sort of explanation you jump to?
Yeah, that's the first thing I said to you.
Right.
The answer that you're looking for is that someone threw the brick through the window and stole the TV. But I would only say that because of my understanding of what people expect, not based on my actual experience.
So now, why do you think that you suppose that one person did that as opposed to three?
Well, that was my initial, right. My whole position is based on I don't know what happened. And my natural reaction will be to take the humble route and admit that right away, not trying to have some kind of egoic assertion that I know what happened. So now I'm going to kind of get caught up in a web of something that doesn't have any rational basis for me.
I think this question's kind of got a bit convoluted now. I think there's a good point here, though, Darren. Sorry, because if I said, okay, so you can't explain it, but I think magical machine elves did it. You don't have an explanation, but I have an explanation. Do you think you'd go with that? You asking me or Krishna?
For Krishna.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So you're saying, you don't want to be too egoistic. You want to humble yourself. So you're going to say, I just don't know. But I'm going to say, well, it's machine elves that did it. It's obvious. I've got an explanation. You've not. So you should believe what I think.
Well, I would ask what the basis is. If you're comparing a belief in God to machine elves stealing a TV, I would say that there is much more basis throughout the history of humankind to support a belief in God than there is to believe that machine elves stole a TV out of someone's home.
Well, I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about in this hypothetical here, we're talking about explanations and explanations of evidence. Like, how should we evaluate claims?
That we had touched on when Darren made a comment about the spiritual reality, how we don't know that it exists, so it's just a belief. I think this understanding of the role belief plays in everything is actually very important to touch on, where everything that we do is actually based on belief. What we believe is the very foundation of our reality, one way or the other, like theistic, atheistic, whatever's in between. What we believe is what really shapes our experience. I think
I
that's
mean, I
something
agree.
that's very
So do
important
I.
to think of.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that. But I think part of the problem here is that, like, it seems like every answer that you give, you're sort of bringing in, you're sort of presupposing the conclusion that you want me to get to, and I'm trying to say what. So when I don't already believe what you believe, like, how should I get that? So even like with these explanations where we're talking about, like, it's nothing to do with God, we're just talking about the nature of explanation in general. It's like, surely I don't need to reference how the facts of the brick going through the window exist in relation to God to be able to make sense of, that one bloke just did it and nicked a TV is, like, probably the most probable explanation given that the evidence that I have.
So from my perspective, you said it's not about God, it's just about the nature of explanation, right?
Yeah, it will be about God later on, but first we need to, like, see what we agree to. Because if you're just going to assert, well, God exists, and I'm just going to say not God exists, and then we're just like at an impasse. It's like we've got to find some neutral.
To go forward constructively here, maybe we should start looking to address the actual evidence of what Krishna would call God and what you would call God, and what that standard of evidence for both of you is. Do you think that would be a productive way forward from here?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendation, Darren?
No. Well, so let's maybe if I put in 2 cents here to start the ball rolling, then.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
For instance, I don't know. People have said I'm atheistic because I don't believe in kind of a God as in an individual being, but I do believe that there is some form of nature beyond our current comprehension which one could call God, whether it's kind of a panpsychist idea of consciousness being pervasive or whatever. But I think that such a state exists, and the reason I believe in that is because there are cases of anomalous experience and veridical perception in near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and various other cognitive states like that, which should not occur is if physicalism was correct in every way. And I believe that those warrant explanations that go beyond what we currently understand in physicalism. So that's kind of the standard of evidence that I'd have, would be those experiences only with veridical perception and only when third party verified by somebody else. And that to me is evidence to say there is something non-physical. So if that's kind of a good example to get the ball rolling, I'll leave it back to you two.
Yeah, so from that position, talking about consciousness, I would say that evidence of the personality, right? One of the things I mentioned in that definition, which Nathan shared, was that God is the supreme personality. So to consider consciousness outside of a person is abstract, actually, right? We only see consciousness within living beings that have personality. That's something that we observe, right? I mean, consciousness isn't something that we see abstractly, like floating in the air, or some weird, abstraction like that. Consciousness means that there is a being who is conscious. So anytime we're talking about consciousness, some being is conscious.
Yes.
So that would be my rational proof. Again, this is not empirical. It's based on some.
Because I agree, consciousness exists.
So consciousness is always a part of a being, a person, a living being, right? Your dog is conscious. You have some connection with the dog. Anyone who has a dog they can understand that their dog is conscious. They have a personal connection with the dog. What Darren was just talking about is that consciousness is pervasive throughout reality. Yes. Beyond just our individual consciousnesses, that consciousness itself is pervasive, that there is this universal consciousness.
Okay, so if there's universal consciousness, right? When people have, say when people have like a near-death experience, why would their experience be, say, of like the operating theatre as opposed to the other side of Africa? Like why, and if their experience, Yeah, let's just keep it at that for now.
May I jump in quickly?
Sure.
Because my point to that question would be, we don't know. And the main thing is that it's been demonstrated to my satisfaction that it takes place. How and why, we have no idea, but we only know that it does seem to happen. And that doesn't work for a physicalist explanation of reality. Total physicalist.
So maybe I can pull on a little more of what the cultural background of the Bhakti Yoga is about. You're saying that we don't know, right? Talking about like essentially a collective body of thought, specifically that we're exposed to in Western culture, that God is not knowable to individuals if God even exists. That's essentially, right, a Western position. But this culture of Bhakti Yoga is coming from individuals who actually have direct experience of that spiritual reality. And that might be hard for many people to believe, no doubt. Like, how to address that. You won't be able to convince everyone, and you shouldn't even try to convince people. It's about talking about what the truth is as far as you can tell. And some people may feel inspired by that, and they may have never heard that before. And they can somehow that resonates with them, and they'd like to find out more, and they end up actually realizing that this makes sense to them. And it's through that personal association. So this Bhakti Yoga accepts that there are people who have had direct experience of divinity. Now, it's very special. It's not something cheap. These people, again, are practicing humility, tolerance, giving all respect to others without expecting any respect in return. They're practicing these systems of yoga to understand what is the self, what is reality, what is the nature of the relationship between the two, what is the role of God in his immanent form as it exists within all living beings. Even this process of yoga poses that has come to the West, that's called Ashtanga yoga, using pranayama, the breathing exercises and the physical poses. The basis of that, it kind of came as a cultural fad, and people do it on Saturdays and then do whatever. But the basis of that is actually how to directly perceive the aspect of God that is within the heart of every living being. Like, the practice of that is meant for that, and there are those throughout history who supposedly have been able to attain that kind of realization. Now, again, how will I prove that to you? I can't bring the person here. I can't have you understand what their experience was. It's something very subjective, no doubt. It's not something that you can just put on a piece of paper and have everyone who reads the piece of paper believe. It's something very subjective. It's something that is related to faith. Faith is fundamental.
Krishna, are there any people? Are there any people who claim to have these divine experiences who you think don't actually have these divine experiences?
But that doesn't mean that there aren't people who also have had
no,
them.
Yeah, I've not said that though, have I? I'm just asking you, like.
Yeah, so I would agree to what you said.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree to that for sure.
So how can you tell the difference between someone claiming to have a divine experience but not actually having one, and someone claiming to have a divine experience but actually having one?
Great, that's a very nice question. So again, it's based on the sincerity of the seeker. Right? Are we looking for a divine experience because we're trying to hit that wow factor, that awe factor, and then we want to go brag about it to people? We want to get our props and all that. No, for a sincere seeker, it's not about that. It's understanding about what am I, who am I, and what am I supposed to be doing? Well, I want to be able to participate in truth. I'm not trying to own it. I'm not trying to claim it, put it in my pocket for when I want to use it. I want to just humbly, if possible, somehow participate in that. And so now I'm looking for others who exemplify these qualities of humility, of tolerance, of the truths that are revealed through various scriptures, and how they can harmonize those things with the contradictions that come in real life. Right? There are many things that are said in scriptures throughout all religions, the Vedas of India, the Bible, Quran, Torah, all these things, that they seem to contradict the things many people experience in their lived reality within normal society. So who are those people that can actually help me to actually humble myself and actually who can actually change my heart? Who is there? I might not be able to put my finger on it, but I can understand that something substantial is there. Who is an individual who can actually help me to do that? And that comes through the qualities of the individual. One of the main qualities also is surrender. I mentioned earlier before. How you can surrender to a teacher, how you can surrender to somebody else. So if you have someone who's just kind of saying, yes, I am a guru, come listen to what I'm saying, I'm a big guy, I know the truth of God and all this kind of thing, and they're not following anyone, they're not having some guru themselves, then that's a little suspicious. Someone who is genuine should also be connected to someone else who is genuine. They've learned from a genuine seeker. And that person who they are following should have learned from another genuine seeker. There is this process of surrender that is very prominent in Bhakti Yoga that is inescapable, because when we are able to surrender to a will and a mind that's beyond our own in a very practical way, not just thinking that I'm going to experience God within my own mind and then kind of go off on a tangent, but how I can surrender myself to a will and a mind that's beyond mine in the form of another person, of not just anyone though, a very special individual. That has a tremendous effect on our ability to come in touch with this kind of spiritual experience. And like you said, there are a lot of fakers out there, no doubt, but there are also very genuine and real individuals. And if we're sincere enough to search and find, and we come to find one, then, we might be able to change our own experience.
Do you think, Krishna, that there are any people who are sincere and humble and think they're surrendering to the divine and claim to have a divine experience, but actually don't?
Well, that's why this element of a line of teachers, of qualified teachers, because it's not just, I think I'm doing something, it's actually doing the thing. If I'm just isolated in my own little mental concoction and I'm not connected to any kind of living system that is beyond myself, meaning a line of teachers, of qualified individuals who have also gone through a process of learning humility, tolerance, giving all respect to others without expecting it in return, who have learned that from someone qualified in the same virtuous way, who has, etc., been following their instructor, who has followed some kind of actual living system. And I can find an individual who is a part of that. And then I can validate my experience based upon participating in that system. Then I don't have to worry about whether I think God is speaking to me in my mind or not, because it's not about what's going on in my mind. Of course, we're always trying to use our reason, we're always trying to use our rationality, but a part of rationality is understanding its limitation. So it's beyond just whatever I think I'm experiencing within my own mind. There's something in the environment that I have to be able to surrender to, and that within the process of Bhakti Yoga comes through being able to surrender to another individual who is qualified, and we can understand who is qualified by our own sincerity.
Would you say that there are people with sort of like false beliefs of the divine who are a part of a community which has authority figures that tell them that that their experiences are correct? Like I don't know, but maybe like the Catholic Church or Muslims or Mormons or the Heaven's Gate cult? Or
I think that God reveals himself in a way which is dependent upon time, circumstance, and the individuals who are being addressed. So I don't think that because Jesus says something a little different than the Buddha, and that all of these religious figures, I don't think because there's differences there that it means that one is wrong and one is right. I think that because individuals are so differentiated and they're all in such different subjective positions, that in order, out of God's infinite mercy and sweetness, that he is able to manifest in infinite ways to relate to any individual based on where they are and bring them closer to him. That is my position. No doubt, it would appear that some are completely off basis and are completely using their imagination But it's hard to say. It's actually hard to say. It's easier to make an offense and think that someone is being a faker than it is to just accept. I don't need to try to make sense of someone else's experience. I can trust what I'm experiencing in my own heart. I can experience things that are rationally changing around me, if they're for the good or if they're worse. I have to use my own reason too. We have free will, but how we can use that free will adequately to advance our own position.
If on this point, if you had a false belief, how would you find out?
How would you find out if you had a false belief?
Yeah, if it turned out you were wrong on this, and this idea of God wasn't true, how could you find out?
Well, I know from experience that every action has a reaction. Newton called it. Newton called it one of his laws in Eastern philosophy is called karma. Every action has an equal reaction. So whatever actions I'm taking, they will produce some result, for better or worse. Punishment.
That assumes what you believe, right? Currently, that's partly assuming the very thing in question here. It's like if in this case that wouldn't be true, right?
No,
so if
every action producing a reaction, I would argue, is true in all cases, even your own case. Every action produces a reaction. I think that's a universal truth. No.
Well, the problem is, I mean,
you say that in action.
Well, Newton's talking about descriptions of forces in physics, and that's a very different thing to karma. But if you're gonna, I suppose, if we're just saying people are part of, like,
it might not be as different as you think. Just in a very simple sense, every action produces a reaction. Whether I'm talking about my finger hitting a domino and a reaction coming that way, or I'm talking about me cursing out some lady in the street, and then later somehow that comes to bite me in the butt.
Well, sort of in the vaguest sense. But I want to stick to, let's say, if that wasn't true, though, how could you find out? If because just assuming that the concepts of the religious belief system are true isn't kind of going to do that work. It's like we're assuming that it's false.
What I'm saying is, I would hope a reaction would come. What I'm saying is, I'm taking some action based on certain faiths, based on certain belief, and a reaction will come, no matter what, whether it is negative or positive. A reaction will come based on my current actions. So if that is a negative reaction, then hopefully I will be astute enough to be able to change my actions in order to not have a reaction that comes negatively. If it's a good reaction, then hopefully I will continue to do what I'm doing so I can continue to get a good reaction. Something like that.
Yeah, I'm aware that the time is right, but it sounds to me like you're just saying something will happen, which doesn't really help me to understand an answer to the question. But
I can't understand the future. Again, this is like, I don't want to imagine a future that hasn't happened. I understand that something will happen. A reaction will come. A reaction has always come, right? Reactions always come from actions. If we can understand the basic principle like that, then based on my current actions, I will have to adjust based on the reactions. It's not a complicated thing, and it's not vague in the sense that it's meaningless. It's pretty direct.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't need to assume a future that hasn't happened, something that doesn't need to imagine something beyond what is very simple. Actions cause reactions, and then we adjust.
Okay, have we managed to reach an end point? Okay, brilliant. You're muted, Nath. Okay, you know that. So we have only a few questions. So perhaps what I'd recommend we do is, if we go through those questions, they're all for Krishna, which tells me that Nathan's audience is here, and which would to be expected, because you don't have a YouTube channel or anything, Krishna, do you? So I suppose, of course, it'd be Nathan's lot that come up, and some very interesting, decent questions as well. So what I suggest, if we read through them questions, and then maybe all three of us can finish off with having a discussion about some aspects, just to finish off the session. Do you agree? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is that all right for everybody in the chat as well? Let me know. So, Krishna, your three questions. It's this name again. I'm so sorry. Melchior Dedusa says, Krishna, can you give an example? You were talking earlier about the harmonization of the universe, or the harmonized nature of the universe. Can you give an example of something unharmonized and provide a method to make the distinction between harmonized and unharmonized?
So I gave the example earlier, which I'll repeat again: being, non-being, and becoming. Right. So being is abstract, and non-being is abstract, but they are real in the process of becoming. All right. You are not what you were 5 years ago. You are different. Everything is changing in the world. Everything that we observe is always in a constant flux, always changing. So that is a harmonization of differences, being and non-being. You are now what you weren't then. And those things have harmonized to produce the present. And that process of harmonization will continue as you become what you will be.
Okay, perfect.
Hopefully that's
Fine.
direct.
Great, thanks, Krishna. Question number 2 by Rez asks, do you agree, Krishna, that things are only what they are at the present moment?
No. Yes and no. Are things only what they are in the present moment? Well, things are always changing, like I just said. So I don't take anything as static. And within the conception of reality that makes sense to me, everything is seen within the context of God, how it can be used to serve God specifically. Now, maybe not everyone agrees with that, no problem. But that is my specific perspective. And if I can accept that principle, then everything, no matter what it will be like, will be used for the same end, to serve God. So, whether it is what it is or it will be something else, hopefully I will be able to, I'll be able to apply the same concept.
Brilliant. Okay, and another question. We've actually had a couple more come in, so you'll have 5. Something Fishy asks, like the name, he actually put except, but I suppose that's except for the purpose to the world, which Nathan will disagree with in brackets. Is there anything the naturalist cannot reasonably explain, but in your view can explain? I'd like to chime in a bit on that as well after you've answered that, Krishna.
If I can answer that question, because I'm not 100% clear on what the scope of the naturalist body of thought is, so I can't really speak for what they will accept and what they won't accept.
Okay, fine. And I'll just add to that, from my own answer, is there anything the naturalist cannot reasonably explain, but in this case my view can? I'd say yes, veridical out of body perception, and all the naturalist explanations for that have been generally discounted by any serious researcher. So that's an interesting one. If you're or was it something fishy, if you want to look for something that kind of goes beyond the naturalist explanation, look at that, honestly look at it, and don't just take other people's word for it. Go in and read the accounts and speak to people, because it is fascinating. That's kind of what I'd add to that. Right, now I've got to find the questions that
Darren,
I
actually, can I make one comment on that question, on the last question? So if I'm understanding naturalism to be essentially anything within the progression of empirical observations, then something that they would not be able to explain is the concept of fruit. We all accept the concept of fruit to be real and substantial. But if we were in a grocery store and I said, hand me a fruit, and you handed me an apple, I said, no, I don't want an apple, I want a fruit. You wouldn't be able to hand me a fruit, because fruit is a universal concept which is not empirical. It only has instances of fruit which manifest as apples, pears, grapes, watermelon. But that doesn't mean we dismiss fruit as something abstract and false just because it doesn't have itself an empirical manifestation. It's a universal concept which is substantial, and it has particular manifestations which have the essence of fruitness. And those are the things that we can understand by empiricism. But that doesn't discount the universal concept, which is actually the essence of all things that are fruit, just like all things that are vegetables, same thing.
Sorry, luckily I'm a quick typer. I was halfway through a question, but yeah, fair enough. Okay, so there's a question now. There are questions for you, Nathan. You are getting some feedback. Nathan, is I suppose, is a flat explanation of local geometry better than no explanation?
What the question's getting at, for those who don't know, is that Euclidean geometry, which is on a flat surface, was basically the norm for thousands of years, up until, when was it, somewhere around the 1800s. A guy called Riemann started doing non-Euclidean geometry, and some people have been thinking about it for a while. And it turns out, like on a flat plane, for example, the interior angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees always and everywhere. But if you curve that plane, the rules are kind of different. Or the fifth postulate of Euclid's Elements, which says there's at most one parallel line to every other point. Well, you get more than one on a curved surface and stuff. So it turns out that flat geometry actually isn't true, in a sense. Curved geometry exists as well. Well, I say the question is sort of drawing out, because I was saying, we should have no explanation where there isn't one, where there isn't a good enough one. But I think that it's not that flat geometry isn't true; it's that flat geometry is incomplete. So it is actually true, that on a flat surface, the interior angles of a triangle are 180 degrees. But if you put that on a curved surface, there's just more information to that isn't understood and isn't contained just within that explanation. So I think it's better than no explanation. I would agree. But if it were a false explanation, then it wouldn't be better than no explanation. We should probably, but then it's, there's questions around that, like, well, how do you know it's a false explanation, right? To be able to say that no explanation. Yeah, I'm not saying that these are sorted problems, but I like the question. I think it was good for challenging some of the things I was saying. So thanks.
Okay, brilliant. And Aaron, if you're still there, could I just ask, could you formulate the question that you had in as one question, because I've lost the context of what was said in reference to your question. So if you could kind of rewrite it out just so that we know what it's about, that'd be ideal. So for both of you now, could you explain your method for knowing what we know? So your method for, I suppose, justifying knowledge of something. Krishna, let's start with you.
Sure. So how do I know what I know? Well, it's just trying to practice this element of surrender and developing faith in that way, accepting that reality as a whole is well beyond myself, and that by my own isolated conception of self, I have no access to the infinite. I am very finite, I'm very limited. I have no capacity to access that on my own. However, I understand also that I'm a part of that infinite. I can't understand it, but I also know that I'm a part of it. So understanding that I'm a part of it, there must be some way that I can know it. And the infinite is able to reveal itself through its own methods. And that's what Bhakti Yoga is. That's what I've come to understand. And through this practice of surrender to someone who knows better, I've been able to gain some knowledge that I did not have previously. So my answer would be that through trying to practice humility and tolerance, and surrender to someone who's qualified and knows better to the best of my judgment, which is, nothing actually. That's how I've come to acquire some knowledge, through surrender, trying to surrender.
Sure. Thanks, Krishna. And Nathan?
Yeah. Now, I don't have a complete account of knowledge to give you, but I would say it's something like a warranted true belief. So, you're going to have to believe it. You can't not believe it to have knowledge. It's going to have to be true. You can't know something that's false. And then the difficult question is, what is warrant? So, there's various kind of, is it that I've got some reason for thinking that it's true? Is it an account I can provide? Well, there's problems with that. It seems there are cases of true beliefs with an account, but where it seems like the person doesn't actually know it. These are called like Gedea cases. It's a really, really difficult question. I think it's something about the environment actually as well, which justifies or provides warrant for a true belief, so we can have knowledge. So it's something to do with like reliable belief forming faculties. So maybe like an eye, or maybe like the neural network for human brain, or whatever it is, or maybe even a soul operating in the environment that it's meant to operate in. So whether, you know, that is by natural selection or creation by God or whatever, that thing is operating in the environment that it's meant for in order to form that belief that has warrant or justification. And maybe the belief has to be somehow caused by the thing that it's about as well. But it's a really difficult question. So the kind of get out is just to say warranted true belief, but not give you an account of what warrant means, really.